welcome to the Smartest Moron, where I'm finally tackling this series. Mainly out of convenience. Thank you, 15th anniversary!
Yeah, this could have been done a bit sooner, but I got distracted. Mainly with mental breakdowns, although that's fitting considering what happens to some of these characters. I got into the series back when Toonami aired .hack Sign, though I kept watching everything out of order because whenever it was about to come on, I was forced around the city to do something. Such is the way of a child without internet. One thing I remember was it being really damn dramatic and dark, and while there was levity in the series, I feel that wasn't made more apparent until GU. The original PS2 games that focused on the events after Sign did occasionally try this, but nothing too memorable. I sadly can't remember too much about that series, and I really don't feel like playing 200 hours worth of it. Anyway, the GU series was remastered for the PS4, and thankfully all bundled into one game, which is good because I realize these games are fairly shorter than I remember, especially Vol.1. So I will divide each volume into one video, and maybe just combine them all once they are all released. The only exception is Volume 4, since that can be beaten in a day. Just remember that I am going to be spoiling elements of pretty much every .hack media I can find, like Sign, the old PS2 series, and Roots. If you want my thought on the gameplay, I think it's okay, and I'm just gonna end it there. Then the boss fights are not very good. Play Zone of the Enders and you'll see right away. Volume 1 is basically the setup for our story, at first showing the functions of the world through a long tutorial with our main star Haseo. Believe it or not, this isn't his first appearance in the series. He was actually a kid back then during the World Revision 1, but extremely deadly and talented, along with being creepy. And yes, this kid was Sora from .hack Sign. However, it is never brought up in the story, and as far as I know it's only brought up in the novel, and Haseo is far different from his counterpart, as you'll soon see. Knowing how this guy is Sora and how he constantly tried to PK people for not giving them their member address, especially girls, it makes this ending a bit of an interesting one to the tutorial, as he is the one about to be PK'd by the party that was helping him the entire time. Part of me did see this coming back then, but designs were fairly unique enough to keep me a bit fooled. Also, we see that the swords have freaking chainsaws on them. And if you think that's brutal now, know that in one scene, Haseo cuts off the head of another character using the same kind of weapon.
So, you think you can go up against me, the Great Bordeaux, and just walk away like nothing happened?
Yeah, I think I can.
Rated E for everyone!
And no, I didn't ruin the joke. I'm referring to the game within the game, since later on, we do get little kids playing this game. But he is saved, and that's in quotation since his character was still killed, by our token mysterious dude for the game, a guy named Oban who guns down the PKers with extreme ease and helps welcome Haseo to the world. Now you don't actually get to see how they became friends, formed the Twilight Brigade, etc. No, that stuff would later be saved for .hack Roots, and yes, that name actually made me think of this image. Normally I do my old rant about this thing, but this is actually pretty common in the .hack series. Not to mention what I get to know from Haseo, Shino, and Oban here is actually sufficient and enough motivation to keep me playing. Unlike in, say, Final Fantasy 15, where I had to dig to find some of the good stuff, but that game left me yearning in the worst way, feeling incomplete. Roots as an anime is also harmless, but halfway through it starts dropping some major spoilers for future volumes. Also, another reason I don't really mind it, well, aside from Haseo needing to develop in this game anyway, a lot of these characters, yeah, they don't actually appear within the game series. So with all that in mind, that's how I view Roots as an extended piece of media. I wanted to take a look at that, but chances are it just get taken down anyway. Thank you, YouTube. One thing I can say is that it does highlight some interesting information, like Haseo getting his new form through the Forest of Pain, and how he knows Taihaku, though that interaction is brief. It shows that Haseo, while a skilled player, was able to get as strong as he did very quickly, yet also explain his lack of skill when compared to the likes of Alcade, but more on that later. Another interesting thing is while Sora loved to pick on people for fights and PK them if they didn't hand over their member address, Haseo is the opposite, hating most people and only attacking PKers, becoming what is known as a PKK. However, like Sora, he really enjoys showing off his power, taking his time in this one scene where he beats up Bordeaux's group after they PK a bunch of people. People like Haseo, though, aren't looked fondly, specifically by Sakaki of Moontree, who tries to use more peaceful methods to handle BKers and...
He's a villain. I mean, just listen to his voice for crying out loud.
You have no authority, and it earns you nothing. So why? I am the leader of Moontree's Unit 2. My friends call me Sakaki. and I'm afraid I cannot overlook your actions. I am happy to see that you understand me so quickly. Furthermore, Haseo is a friend of Atali, one of us. May I ask you to refrain from trying to PK him as well?
To no one's surprise, Haseo doesn't put up with him much, and yet is a bit interested in Atali, but only because she possesses the same character model as Shino, the person he lost. Also, get used to seeing the same character models within the game. I mean, my god, some don't even have different colors. Later on, Haseo does meet up with Oban for more exposition, and we learn there was a guild they were in, but disbanded when Oban disappeared, and Shino later put into a coma by being called Tri-Edge. Haseo, not being the most patient person in the world, goes ahead of Oban to take down Tri-Edge. Whatever competence Haseo displayed before, well, yeah, none of that powerful is useful against Tri-Edge at all. Even at one point he gets one of his weapons destroyed. It's pretty much the beatdown to end all beatdowns. After he's data drained, he's reset to level 1, and everything has basically been reformatted. AKA the nightmare every person who owns a hard drive has when it becomes corrupted. God, I never want to go through that ever again. So this means Haseo has to start from the beginning, eventually learning that something about his character has changed, as something seems to have won out. This is the Avatar. No, not that one. Not that one either, moron. No, you're actually right. These are beings actually based off the 8 original faces from the first set of Dot Hack games. Ironically, Haseo's avatar is Skaith, the same phase that actually data drained him when he was Sora back in Sign. And while you think this would make Haseo's quest easier, not really. He can't just summon it whenever he wants just yet. One, because it's very dangerous and possible to put people into comas. We see its devastating effects when Haseo first uses it against Bordeaux. And two, well...
Look, I'll be blunt. Haseo is an asshole that deserves to be hit many times over.
We can see that early on as he slays some PKers, letting them kill off some players before he moved in. He cares very little for actually protecting people, at least if he doesn't know them, as we do see moments where even if someone irritates him like Atali, he is willing to shield her from something beyond their power. But there's a reason I do like Haseo thanks to a supporting cast. You do not tolerate his bullshit. People like Pi are willing to challenge him and his views, which is refreshing from seeing characters powerless to do nothing while the Church continues to be the biggest asshole known to mankind. Now sometimes that keeps happening, but I'm okay with it given how the characters are represented. Haseo's development though is the game's most interesting element. Much like Dante, I had not yet experienced development quite like his. Though the Brooding Hero wasn't really anything new with the likes of Vincent Valentine or Kratos from God of War, Haseo brought with him smugness and anger, making him more memorable even in some bad scenes. Nowadays, he'd be a character I would dread at seeing first glance, much like Patroclus and Reboot Dante, and had some really crappy development that did not do the characters justice and make them likable. Fortunately, the game is able to do Haseo just right in not only establishing his character, but what he is fighting for, which is to save his friend Shino. The most important thing they did though was make sure Haseo wasn't completely heartless in his quest for his goal. Aside from his one-man mission to bring Shino back, who he clearly has a lot of affection for, he can be kind to little kids, even cut them some slack. One situation had Haseo take over a shop for a guild he was suddenly pulled into. Since Bo's money was stolen by his sister, he decided to give an item to the kid for free. He even puts himself on the line to make sure Syllabus and Gaspard weren't bullied, even making Syllabus stay with Gaspard, which gave him a handicap in the tournament.
I'd also like to add I was in complete control of this fight. I just want to add that.
All this helps make Haseo a bit more sympathetic, despite how evil he can act when getting his avatar, or his general douchiness. I feel motivated to keep playing because the desire to see him change is that much more interesting. Another moment I would like to point out was him saving Pi, and was extremely worried he was responsible for making her a lost one. He ultimately reverts back to his regular asshole attitude / tsundere mode, but he does kinda get better about it. He even fears using the avatar on Arcade when he is losing, likely feeling a slight loss of control, though I think that was a bit of a missed chance to do something as he is still a gigantic asshole after the fight. It's only when Kun was nearly made into a lost one does he finally stop, as he loses control. And there's the key. Haseo prefers things to be in his control, otherwise things are bound to screw up. It's why he was so confident when using his avatar, treating it no differently from one of his weapons. With the control gone, well, he just couldn't handle it. Plus Haseo didn't legitimately want to put people into comas, barring maybe Bordeaux since he felt she deserved that. The tournament also shows some more insight, with Haseo's skill level as that comes into question. Though no doubt decent, it's clear with battles like against Bordeaux and her gang, along with Arcade, Haseo desperately needed to improve in other ways. it was actually very believable he'd lose to someone as focused as Alcade. Just look back to the first fight, and see how easy he is disarmed by Bordeaux's gang when they are in their upper 20s in terms of levels at best right now. Sure, he still curb stomped them easily enough, but his confidence is another major factor that does cause his downfall, like when he thought he could fully control Skate. His pride often gets in the way, much like it does, say, Vegeta, arguably a character that had a tendency to make everything worse in Z. Oddly enough, Alcade would receive the same kind of treatment after her defeat, learning from Pi that Haseo cheated for a good reason, and later come for Haseo's assistance, but her development is something I'll get a bit more into in part 2. This also touches on a hatred to lose, something that's easily identified in his rant to Adelie. Given his loss to Tri-Edge, along with being PK'd in the past, that likely only helped his urge to win, even more so when it's against people he could not stand like Bordeaux. While in this game he definitely changes a lot, his development is far from being over. Adelie, on the other hand, well, I remember hating her a lot when I first played, mellowing out by the time I finished Volume 2 and 3. Now, after several years later, well, she starts off a bit grating given her laid-back attitude and forcing her stuff onto Haseo. Although it was hilarious to see Haseo hold in every bit of his anger at certain points, but it's easier to understand when you remember that she's just someone who does like to have fun in her own way, and there's no shame in picking up a game and liking it for certain elements more than others, especially when this game has a certain VR element to it. And knowing her backstory later on does help, but we'll get to that in Volume 2. With Haseo at her side, she begins to develop a lot more, putting in a ton of hard work in researching the game's mechanics to be a better cleric, and even starts to understand why fighting is so fun. We don't get her full story here, sure, but we don't need it right now since it's easy to understand her point of view as just someone who wants to have fun in her own way.
Granted, I can imagine some people getting annoyed by her in Volume 1. I was when I first played the game anyway. Hell, I even skipped some of the cutscenes. Mainly because, well, she's all busy seeing how everything is so pretty and everything. You're trying to save a friend from being in a frickin' coma!
The development between Haseo and Adelie can actually be seen as the hardcore versus casual gamer argument, as they both have different viewpoints on how to have fun. Haseo admittedly has some good reasons, but even he admits he just likes to fight and crush his foes, and I already explained how far he was willing to go to do that. It's through understanding one another that their bond grows, and kinda how I would like the debate between these styles of gamers be handled, and a bit realistic when I realize how childish or dickish some hardcore gamers can be. And before you insult me, yes, I fall into that category too. At least I admit it. So walking away from this volume, I do appreciate Adelie's character much more. Though the event that got me the most, aside from her slapping Haseo for being a dick to her friends and accusing her of being a traitor, was the scene with Oban confessing everything about Shino after Haseo won the tournament. That's where we do learn how hard she was working, and to have all that effort feel like it's for nothing when the guy you are trying to befriend can only see Shino instead of you. And Haseo's case isn't helped with his constant dickery in the past. Adelie even points out that Haseo would have chosen another healer if he knew one, and this is actually proven with not just that post-syllabus maid calling out for Harvest Clerics, but also Haseo saying he did not want to use Adelie either before going on a quest. This little bit of her character was actually relatable, trying to satisfy someone who will always be angry to you. It sucks that she is treated this way. Her point of view is even a bit more disturbing when you consider she is also technically capable of using an epitaph like Haseo, eventually anyway, so chances are she had to witness Haseo using Skeeth too. She did shout for him to stop after all. I'll talk more about her character in Volume 2 since this plotline is technically cut off, and really reminds me how much of a tease this game really was with its endings.
Nobody likes a tease, Donna!
Also, that joke provides a perfectly good segue into Pi. Despite the revealing attire her character wears, she has the opposite attitude one would expect, as she's perhaps one of the most serious cast members, often scolding Kun and thinking more realistically, like predicting Haseo would abuse his avatar. Yet she does genuinely care about Haseo and what he goes through, especially when he manages to save her when she gets infected by Ida, and saw that there was some kind of humanity in him. She definitely felt like a big sister in that regard, like when she defended Haseo's actions against Alcade during a quest, even helping him to level up with a certain component to add to his accessory that would enable faster grinding. Plus her attitude is one of the most refreshing as she tries to keep Haseo in line, doing the kind of thing I would like to see others do when presented with a grand asshole like this. While I admit Kun's approach can be a bit handy, sometimes people really need a good slap across the head to set them straight, even if she doesn't actually slap Haseo. Kun, on the other hand, was actually the kind of protagonist I would have expected to be in this game, perhaps even the lead character given how noble he can be with how he wants to help Haseo and the new people. You know, when he isn't chasing virtual skirts around. On his own, he's just fine, but when Haseo is involved, I found him the perfect foil to Haseo's raging dickery, and that Haseo should aim to be more like Kun, more like a good person. His best moment is definitely when he and Haseo faced off, a battle that was inevitable even if they weren't in the tournament given their different points of view. Thankfully he had just the right avatar with the right ability to make sure Haseo learned his lesson, and he didn't end up in a coma, or worse. And that also shows he's willing to do just about anything to help change a person. Plus his cheerful attitude in a group of grumps was refreshing, especially when he knows how to handle dealing with people in positive ways. At least if they don't look like they'll rip his head off for saying something, like when he didn't speak at all when Alcade was around. Yada and Oban though still fall in the mysterious category, as does Sakaki, though he can be easily seen as a villain in the background. In addition to his voice actor, who I know plays a ton of villains, the game hinted at that when Haseo met Zilkova. Sadly, not much can be said right now, but it is good to see old members like Yada, who was Wise Man in the old .hack games, and Pyros III make some comebacks, although they all feel quite distant from each other, and I feel that hurts the game for fans of the old .hack series on the PS2. In all 4 games, I sadly can't recall Yada and Endrins, who is Elk, talk at all to each other. It feels like a wasted opportunity, especially given how Elk turned out given the loss of Mia, another character from the last game series who we hung around a lot. We'll definitely be seeing more of these guys later, but for what roles they had to play here, they were just fine. Although admittedly, one has to wonder why Haseo and Oban were friends with how dickish or vague either of them could be in this game.
And I think we can end it there for Volume 1. Join me next time in Volume 2, where we explore more of Haseo and Adeli's development, mainly them because they are the main characters after all, as well as a few others. I'm the Smartest Moron, and thank you for your time.